Boy holds his stillborn brother. What happens next shocks everyone. Hey there, amazing viewers. Globe showing America's where in the world are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories reach. Globe showing Europe Africa sparkles. If this heartwarming miracle touched you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Bell, we've got another incredible story coming your way tomorrow. You won't want to miss it. What do you think about this unbelievable moment? Share your thoughts below, and let's chat. Left speech bubble speech balloons. See you in the next story. Rocket fire. At 7 years old, Jake had spent months dreaming about the day his little brother would arrive. Ever since his parents told him the big news, he had imagined all the things they would do together, playing with his favorite toy cars, building forts out of couch cushions, and sharing the kinds of secrets only brothers could understand. Every night before bed, he would sit beside his mom, Emily, resting his small hands on her growing belly, waiting for a tiny kick. Sometimes he felt nothing, but other times, the soft thump of movement made him giggle with excitement. "Mom, I think he just high-fived me," he would say, his eyes shining with joy. Emily would laugh, gently rubbing her belly. "Maybe he did, sweetheart. I think he's excited to meet you, too." One evening, as Emily folded freshly washed baby clothes in the nursery, Jake came running in with an important question. "Mom," he said, tilting his head, "do you think my baby brother will like dinosaurs?" Emily smiled, placing a tiny blue onesie into the drawer. "I'm sure he will love whatever you show him, Jake. You're going to be the best big brother in the world." Jake grinned, satisfied with her answer, but before he could respond, Emily gasped softly. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling a sudden movement. "Come here, sweetheart," she said. "Do you want to feel him kicking?" Jake's eyes widened as he hurried over. He pressed his small hands against her belly, holding his breath. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, thump! A strong little kick met his palm. His face lit up. "He's saying hi to me," he laughed, looking up at his mom with pure excitement. Just then, his dad, Mark, walked into the room, adjusting his tie. "What's going on in here?" he asked, raising an eyebrow with a smile. "Dad, my brother just kicked me. He's strong," Jake exclaimed, bouncing on his heels. Mark chuckled, ruffling Jake's hair. "That's my boy," he said proudly. "It won't be long now. Just a few more days and you'll finally meet him." Emily winced suddenly, placing a hand on her stomach. A sharp pain shot through her, but she quickly masked it with a reassuring smile. "Just another strong kick," she said, waving off any concern. Mark hesitated for a second, worry flickering in his eyes, but she urged him to go. "You're late for work already." "I'm fine, I promise." Jake, however, felt something deep inside him, a strange uneasiness he couldn't quite explain. He didn't know why, but at that moment, he hugged his mom a little tighter than usual. "Love you, Mom," he whispered. Emily kissed the top of his head. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." Jake left the room, still smiling, completely unaware that in just a few hours, everything would change forever. The morning started like any other. Sunlight streamed through the windows as Jake played in his room, lining up his toy cars in a perfect row. But deep down, something felt off. He couldn't explain it. It was just a weird, uneasy feeling that wouldn't go away. Downstairs, Emily moved around the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. She was almost 9 months pregnant, and though she tried to hide it, she had been feeling more exhausted than usual. Every movement felt heavier. Every step took more effort. But she pushed through, telling herself it was just the normal exhaustion of late pregnancy. Mark had already left for work, leaving Emily and Jake to enjoy a slow morning together. As she poured herself a glass of water, a sudden wave of dizziness hit her. She grabbed the counter for support, trying to steady herself, but the room spun around her. Then, everything went black. A loud crash echoed through the house. Jake's heart stopped. He looked toward the door, his stomach twisting. "Mom," he called, waiting for her usual cheerful response. Silence. Something was wrong. Panic surged through him as he bolted down the hallway and into the kitchen. The sight before him made his breath catch in his throat. His mother lay crumpled on the floor, her face pale, her forehead damp with sweat. The glass of water lay shattered beside her, droplets glistening on the tile. "Mom!" Jake cried, running to her side. His small hands shook as he gently touched her arm. "Wake up! Please wake up!" Emily's eyelids fluttered. Her lips parted as she struggled to speak. "Jake," she whispered, her voice weak and strained. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay conscious. "Listen to me. I need you to be brave. Get my phone. Call 911. Jake's hands trembled, but he knew he had to act fast. His mom needed help, now. He sprinted into the living room, searching frantically. Where was her phone? His heart pounded as he spotted it on the coffee table. Grabbing it, he quickly dialed. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. Jake's voice cracked. My mom, she fell. She's pregnant, and she won't wake up. Please help us. Okay, sweetheart, stay calm, the operator said gently. Help is on the way. Is she breathing? Jake rushed back to Emily, pressing his hand against her cheek. Mom? Please say something. Emily barely nodded. Tell them, baby, she mumbled. Tears welled in Jake's eyes as he turned back to the phone. She says something's wrong with the baby, he said, his voice breaking. Stay with her, okay? Paramedics will be there soon. Minutes felt like hours. Then, sirens. Flashing lights. The front door burst open as paramedics rushed inside. Jake backed up as they surrounded his mother, checking her pulse, asking questions he couldn't understand. One of them turned to him. Are you her son? Jake nodded, wiping his eyes. She's in good hands, buddy, the paramedic assured him. Do you want to ride with her? Jake didn't hesitate. Yes. He climbed into the ambulance, clutching his mother's hand, whispering over and over, You're gonna be okay, Mom. I promise. But deep inside, he was terrified. Because promises don't always stop bad things from happening. And Jake had a feeling that their nightmare was just beginning. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and something else, something Jake couldn't quite describe. Fear, maybe. He sat in the waiting room, his legs swinging nervously over the edge of the chair. The ambulance ride had been a blur, filled with flashing lights and the steady beep of machines monitoring his mom. He had held her hand the entire time, whispering, Stay with me, Mom. Please. Now, she was behind those big, cold metal doors. And Jake was stuck out here, waiting. The room was too quiet, except for the distant murmur of doctors and the occasional buzz of the overhead speaker. His fingers curled into fists. Why wouldn't anyone tell him what was happening? Then, the door swung open. His dad, Mark, rushed in, his face pale, his tie loosened like he had been pulling at it. His eyes locked onto Jake, and in 2 long strides, he was kneeling in front of him. "Jake! Are you okay? What happened?" Jake swallowed hard. "Mom, she fell," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She couldn't get up. I called 911. Mark's face tightened, a mixture of worry and pride flickering in his eyes. "You did the right thing, buddy." He ruffled Jake's hair, but it didn't feel the same. His hand was shaking. Before Jake could say anything else, a doctor walked up to them. She had a serious expression, her white coat crisp, a clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk. It's urgent." Mark stood quickly. "Is Emily okay? What about the baby?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at Jake. Mark looked down at his son, then back at the doctor. "He's staying." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Your wife suffered a severe placental abruption. She lost a lot of blood, and the baby was in distress. We had to perform an emergency C-section to save Emily's life." Mark's breath hitched. "And the baby?" The doctor's grip on the clipboard tightened. "I'm so sorry." 2 words. That was all it took. Mark's shoulders slumped. His hands went to his face as he inhaled sharply. He turned away for a second, as if trying to keep it together, but Jake could see his dad's whole body trembling. Jake blinked, not understanding. His heart pounded in his chest. "What do you mean?" he asked, stepping forward. "Where's my brother?" Mark turned, his eyes red. His voice cracked as he whispered, "He's gone, Jake." The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. Gone? No. That wasn't possible. His brother wasn't supposed to be gone. He was supposed to be here. With him. Jake shook his head furiously. "No. That's not true. I told him I would protect him." His small fists clenched. "I promised." Tears spilled down his cheeks as he stumbled back. Mark reached for him, but Jake pulled away. He couldn't accept it. He wouldn't. The doctor spoke softly. "If you'd like, you can say goodbye." Jake barely heard her. His ears were ringing. His little brother, his best friend before he even met him, was gone. And there was nothing he could do to change it. Jake's hands trembled as he followed the doctor down the quiet hallway. His dad walked beside him, silent, his face pale and unreadable. The air felt heavy, pressing down on Jake's small shoulders like an invisible weight. He didn't want to do this. He shouldn't have to do this. His little brother was supposed to be here, alive, crying, reaching for him. Instead, they were leading him into a cold, sterile room to say goodbye, a word that didn't make sense. Inside, his mom, Emily, was sitting up in bed, her face streaked with dried tears. She looked so tired, so broken. When she saw Jake, she tried to smile, but it barely reached her eyes. The doctor stepped forward, carrying a small bundle wrapped in a soft white blanket. The sight made Jake's stomach twist. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He was supposed to hold his baby brother for the first time while he wiggled and cooed, not like this. Emily let out a quiet sob as she reached for the baby, cradling him gently against her chest. Her whole body shook as she whispered, "My sweet boy. I'm so sorry." Jake swallowed hard. His chest hurt, his throat burned, but he forced himself to take a step forward. "Mom, can I hold him?" Emily looked at Mark, then at the doctor. The doctor hesitated before giving a small nod. Carefully, Emily placed the tiny baby into Jake's waiting arms. The moment he felt the small weight against him, something shifted. Jake looked down at his brother's face, his tiny nose, his soft cheeks, his little hands curled into fists. He looked like he was just sleeping. Tears blurred Jake's vision as he traced a trembling finger over his brother's cold cheek. "I told you I'd protect you," he whispered. His voice broke. "I'm so sorry I didn't." He rocked the baby gently, the way he'd seen his mom do with other babies before. "I love you," he whispered, his tears dripping onto the soft blanket. "I would have been the best big brother, I swear." A sudden, sharp gasp filled the room. Jake's head snapped up. His parents froze. Then, another sound. A weak, shaky cry. Jake's eyes widened as he felt the tiny body in his arms move. Emily let out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Mark stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the hospital bed for support. The doctor rushed forward, fumbling for her stethoscope. This isn't possible," she stammered, pressing it to the baby's chest. The faintest, strongest heartbeat thumped against her fingers. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she reached out, desperate to hold her son again. "Oh my God! He's alive! He's alive!" Jake looked down at his baby brother, now letting out stronger, more desperate cries. His chest rose and fell, his tiny hands twitching, as if reaching for his family. A grin broke through Jake's tears. "I told you," he whispered. "I told you I'd save you." And in that moment, the impossible happened. The room stood still. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved, no one spoke, only the sound of the miracle filled the air. The soft, weak cries of the baby, growing stronger with every second, sent shockwaves through everyone in the room. Emily sobbed, reaching for her son, her hands shaking as she cradled him against her chest. "You're here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You came back to us." Mark ran a trembling hand through his hair, his knees nearly giving out. How is this possible?" His voice was barely more than a whisper. He turned to the doctor, desperate for an explanation. Dr. Reynolds, still visibly shaken, pressed her stethoscope against the baby's tiny chest again. She shook her head in disbelief. I don't know," she admitted. "When we checked, he had no vital signs. No heartbeat. No breathing. But now his heart is steady. His lungs are strong." She looked up at the family, her voice filled with awe. "I've never seen anything like this before." Jake, still wiping his tears, grinned through the overwhelming flood of emotions. He stepped closer, reaching out a hand to his baby brother, his finger barely brushing against the infant's tiny fist. In that moment, the baby curled his fingers around Jake's, a perfect, tiny grip. Jake gasped softly, his eyes wide. "See," he whispered, looking up at his parents. I told you I'd save him." Emily let out a shaky laugh, pressing a kiss to her newborn's forehead. "You did, sweetheart," she murmured. "You really did." Mark wrapped his arms around both of them, his family, pulling them into a deep embrace. He could hardly believe what was happening, but one thing was clear: his son had survived something unexplainable. Tears of relief, joy, and pure gratitude flowed freely as nurses rushed in, drawn by the commotion. As they checked the baby's vitals, whispering in shock, one of them finally asked, "What's his name?" Emily and Mark exchanged a look, and then, almost in perfect harmony, they answered, "Elijah." Jake grinned. "Elijah," he repeated, as if the name itself was magic. "That's perfect." Word of Elijah's miraculous survival spread like wildfire throughout the hospital. Doctors and nurses stopped by, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some called it a medical mystery. Others, a miracle. But to Jake, it was simple. He had made a promise. And promises, when made from the heart, were meant to be kept. That night, as the hospital quieted down, Jake sat beside his mom's bed, watching over his baby brother. He placed a protective hand on Elijah's tiny body, his heart filled with a newfound purpose. From now on, he wouldn't just be a big brother. He would be Elijah's protector, his guardian, his best friend. And no matter what, he would never break his promise again. What an incredible story, a moment of pure heartbreak turned into a miracle right before our eyes. Blue Heart, can you imagine what it must have been like for Jake and his family? From devastation to absolute joy in just moments, it's something that defies all logic. Now, we want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing down. Sparkles, do you believe in miracles? Have you ever experienced something that science just couldn't explain? Sparkles, what would you have done if you were in Jake's place? Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, what message would you share with little Elijah and his family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's turn this space into a community where we share, connect, and inspire each other. Speech Balloon Sparkling Heart. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow, we have another unbelievable story that you won't want to miss. Rocket Bell. We're reading every comment, so let's talk. Red Heart.